Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the CLO Power Hour. Today's session is titled The Importance of Purpose, Meaning, and Opportunity. I'm Liz Ludfi, Managing Editor for Chief Learning Officer, and I'll be your facilitator for today's session. We have an amazing group of speakers joining us. The third speaker today is Ken Roden, Senior Director of Brand Strategy at Wiley, with his presentation, Human Connection Drives Learning Impact. Ken, the virtual mic is yours.
Great, and thank you everyone for joining. I love this idea of fast pitches, fast conversations where we get to hear a few different ideas on a specific theme and engage with each other as well as the audience. This has been a great event so far. As mentioned, I'm going to talk about how human connection drives impactful learning or meaningful learning. And a little about me, I've spent my career focused on how to grow and develop employees, and not just with focus on how that drives business outcomes, but also how does it drive people's internal motivations, makes them feel connected to the business and feel like they're somewhere that carries meaning for them. Like many of you, I'm a lifelong learner. I've actually dedicated the last year to try to learn one new skill a week. I have learned how to ride a bike. I've learned how to use Canva, which is kind of like a digital marketing tool. And I learned how to wrap the tightest burrito possible so that no food falls out. I'm happy to share the link to that YouTube video. It comes in handy more times than you think. So along with this concept of learning, during the pandemic, I was really focused on wanting to use that time in a meaningful way for me. And so at the beginning, I said, okay, I'm going to learn 3 things and focus on that. So I decided I was going to learn how to crochet, which is kind of like knitting. I was going to learn data analytics, whatever that meant, and I was going to learn French. And I bought some books, found some podcasts, signed up for some online courses. I was ready to go. Started dedicating time every week to this program, the program that I created for myself. And at the beginning, I was going. It was good. But towards the end, I realized that I'm actually horrible at crocheting. It's not something in my wheelhouse. I didn't learn data analytics, and je parle un peu de français, but I am no expert. I tried really hard, but when I thought about what happened, I realized that I lost motivation really quickly. I was actually motivated at the beginning because I wanted to use this time to learn, but I had no peers, no colleagues who were working on the same thing I was. I got stuck several times with things that were difficult. And so I ended up giving up on a lot of these things. I was also distracted. I don't know about you all, but I actually had a partner and some kids in the house, and it was really hard for us to do anything besides the required schoolwork and work we had to do until we figured out an appropriate way to kind of get this all done. But that really impacted my focus on learning. And then also, I had a lack of direction. The idea that I wanted to learn these things was great, but there wasn't anyone really to help me along the way, encourage me, make this contextually relevant for me. And also, none of these skills were that relevant to my job. And I feel like there's a lot of parallels with how we imagined work, learning at work during the pandemic. At the beginning, we all had these great Zoom backgrounds, and we were doing lunch and learns and wellness events and going through some online trainings. We made a lot of investment in self-paced learning during the pandemic. But in reality, in this box, everything was fine, but actually it was utter and complete chaos around us. There was too much going on, and we were unable to focus on anything besides getting the bare minimum of work done, and we particularly weren't making time for learning. And that's why you're seeing 1 in 2 employees say that they're burned out. They're not feeling like they have the time to get their regular job done because they're in meetings, Zoom meetings all the time. And then they're trying to spend a lot of time catching up, finding information, or where to find information, or catching up with someone. And it's actually hurt how business functions, but how people connect. And you're seeing a decrease in collaboration as well. And when people aren't connected to the work that they're doing or the people, and they're not working together, they're not engaged. Right now, Gallup is saying engagement is around 21%, and it's been there for the past few years. It's staying stagnant, except in Europe where it's dropped to 14%. Globally, we have an engagement issues with employees. And the takeaway here is meaningful learning isn't happening at work right now because we don't have those connections. We have full calendars where people don't have time to learn. That's why I love the concept of a 4x1 work schedule where we spend enough time to dedicate towards learning. And we also have invested a lot into learning that is async or self-paced. And that's great, especially for those people who are, kind of gritty and want to learn and are okay with learning on their alone. But the majority of employees don't have the time or maybe the skill set or the intrinsic motivation to do so. And also that relates to misconnections. People at work miss connecting with other humans, and having a shared connection with others in the office place actually drives more engagement. Successful teams perform better for the business, which is all up making everyone happier. So the team at Wiley kind of said, well, what if we could think about a scalable way to invest in training and development in this new digital world we're in? But rather than just having software thrown at it, how could we keep it human and also keep the content relevant? And so we're really trying to invest in cohort-based learning. And cohort-based learning isn't new, right? You've all been familiar with it and invested in certain ways. But we're trying to meet it at its core, where it's really focused on human connection, which also allows for flexibility. But at the core, people learn best from people. So let's not remove people from learning. That's the most critical takeaway that I'd like you to leave with from this session. We have 4 prongs on how we approach this cohort-based learning style, which is with relevant content. We want to make sure not only is it fresh content, but it's what's meaningful to your business. For example, my data analytics course might not have been the right content for me to learn when I really should have been learning more about digital marketing or resilience or creativity. And we also want to make sure that we blend in expert instruction. Having someone who knows the content and who knows the curriculum and the desired outcomes of the course, what success looks like, is very powerful. But imagine if there's also someone who has the skill set to drive better connection, drive better communication within that training, so that people within the cohort feel like they're in a classroom experience uncomparable to anything else, no matter where they are. And that goes into blended experiences. We understand that we are in a dispersed, hybrid, remote, digital, sometime in office workplace. And we want to make sure that learners have the flexibility to engage with content that makes sense to be accessed on their own, but also there's dedicated time for facilitated and conversation training. And last, we want it to be related to what the organization's trying to drive, whether that's improving communication with the organization, developing resilience, creativity. Those are some of my favorite courses that we offer at Wiley. And the other thing that's critical around this cohort-based topic is keeping the conversation going. There's a lot of trainings out there. You're seeing a lot of companies invest in developing these skills, hard and soft, in their employees. And a lot of them are happening outside of the business, meaning someone might go take a 4-week course through a university, or they might do it through a third-party group or an association. And those trainings are great. They are relevant. But imagine how impactful it would be to have your employees learning together, addressing real topics in that they encounter in the business, and then be able to use that as actual application that's related to the topic they're learning about. Imagine if there was a resilience training and your employees were able to talk about how they stay resilient in their line of work. Also, it's going to lead to more application following those trainings. Just to give you an idea, this is how we think about a standard program. 4 weeks long, you see self-paced and async portions of the course, but also dedicated time for facilitated and cohort-based engagement. It's about 10 hours over the course of 4 weeks. Now, the difference in having a 3-day on-site training is going to be actually that this learner is going to be able to do the courses on their time and also not have to travel, maybe be away from family, or also focus on their day job, which is sometimes a huge distraction when people are at on-site conferences. Now, what's the impact? Cohort-based learning does drive higher course completion, as reported by Wiley in a recent study. We also see an increased confidence score from learners. And my takeaway from that is, when you learn something new, you might be a little hesitant to actually apply that knowledge somewhere. And imagine if you're with your colleagues, you've gone through this course together, and now you're ready to maybe try out a little bit of a new communication style or a new leadership style. And you're going to be able to actually try that out with others who were in that program with you to give you real-time feedback on that performance. And so you're going to be more confident in learning and developing that skill. It's going to stack on top of each other. And additionally, cohort-based learning is a higher MPS than self-paced learning. Self-paced has its place, but for these meaningful skills that people are looking to develop to avoid burnout, feeling a sense of belonging and connection to the workplace, these types of courses are going to make a difference. And I just want to hit on the fact again, if people don't feel connected to the work, they're not going to show up in a way that's good for them or good for the business. So if we can help foster connections, that's going to be the game changer. And right now, learning and training is one of the only opportunities for employees to connect with one another. It doesn't happen many other places, if at all. So we have a really cool opportunity as being in the learning space to make that impact, to really make a difference in employees' lives. Now, this is all in this suite of offerings for Wiley's portfolio for professional learners, where we strive to unlock human potential. But going back to this, I said I wanted to learn these things. It was with the best intent, but if I maybe was partnering with an organization, or maybe I had a manager who could help guide me through what I wanted to invest for my own personal development, they might have recommended something like this. Maybe keep the French because I work with a team in Europe. Invest into digital marketing because those skills are constantly being evolved. And also maybe pick up a course like Leading from the Middle, which is a concept of how do you engage with your managers, your team, as well as your peers. And I just realized I did the YMCA a little bit just now, so that was kind of fun. I'll use that in the future. But going back to this, these are the courses I should have learned. And with a little course instruction and direction, I might have actually completed this during COVID. So I want to leave you with, how do you think about driving connection with your employees and your learners so that they feel connected to your space, to your workspace, no matter if it's in person or digital? Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ken. Connection really is the foundation, isn't it? Now I'd like to invite all three speakers back up for Q&A. I've been saving some questions that are coming in through the chat. We've had a lot of really good ones come in, but feel free to keep dropping them in and we'll get through as many as possible. Excuse me. We actually have a few minutes extra, so ask as many questions as y'all want. While those are coming in, I did have one question that I wanted to sort of address to the group at large, and anyone can take the lead on it just as those questions are coming in. So all of you sort of discussed different types of workplace innovation for success. So bridging strategic learning developments with the business, strengthening connection to drive impactful learning experiences, establishing a new work week schedule. My question for you is, how do learning leaders help drive these ideas in an organization that may be stagnant or perhaps in a period of exhaustion or burnout?
I can start.
Great, yeah.
So I think based on what Ken was saying, some of it too, I mean, people are tired. It is hard, and we're seeing it in our stats as well. It's hard to even commit to growing yourself when you're already working 10, 12, 13 hours a day. And on top of that, home life commitments and other things going on in your life. So it's really hard for people to want to take extra time, even when it comes to themselves. So when you're selling sort of learning as a solution to solve a problem, I think you get a lot more buy-in from leaders when they see that there's a value to what you're doing, which is why I always point to what's the value you're attaching to. At LAM, we always say, what's the problem you're trying to solve? So if you really hone in and I say one thing at a time, one thing that you feel you can have an impact on, make a change to, start with a small pilot, right? Just get some buy-in in one way. The pilot will give you insights into what worked well, what didn't work well. Did you have the type of impact that you anticipated? And that will give you kind of what the information you need if you want to take that to a global scale and roll it out officially. But I think, yeah, connecting the dots for leaders on impact and value, identifying a real problem that exists that needs to be solved, and then piloting and starting small, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say I completely agree. I think learning right now is in a really interesting point within the organization. Learning and training is the only time that employees get a chance to connect with each other. There are maybe town halls at your business, there's maybe team meetings, but that's not a chance for people to actually connect and interact with each other and discuss what they're actually experiencing in the workplace. Learning is the connection point for companies. That's a lot of power for HR, for L&D. I think coming in pretty strong with that position and asking your business leaders, when else do they get a chance to connect? Let's invest in this and really help drive some connection for our employees.
That's some great insight. We had a question come in actually for Ken. By the way, Ken, I may need that burrito video that you were mentioning as well. I'm terrible at rolling burritos. So a question that came in was, any thoughts on an optimal cohort size? People were sounding off in the chat what they thought was a good size for a cohort, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the research that we've done and what we've seen from customers, somewhere between 8 and 12 is what we recommend. You can go bigger, but then when you have facilitators or you want to do breakouts, you get to some odd mixings of the situation. And any less, it might not be valuable to the business as an investment.
Absolutely. And then just as a follow-up to that, because someone else asked a great cohort-based question, how do you scale cohort-based learning to thousands of employees distributed globally, particularly for those modules that are expert-led or facilitated?
Yeah, so it depends on the organization, but what I'll say as a blanket, what we try to uncover is what are the core goals that the company is trying to achieve from types of training they want. And then we actually are able to look regionally to understand what might be needed to be tailored to, maybe what the French team or the European team might need to learn versus the US team could be slightly different. So we're going to do some slight tailoring, but we want to make sure we're still focused on the desired outcomes collectively. And then we actually have a network of facilitators that we use who are all focused on the same curriculum and type of outcome, and they know how to use the tool. So for us, that's how we approach this.
Cool. We had a question come in for Brandon during his talk. It was about the expectation of 40 hours. So is there still an expectation to still do as much during the work week in that 4+1 model? What is the demand in terms of hours that you would see as ideal?
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, it's a great question. I think, the idea of hours has been mangled in a lot of ways, right, as a result of the pandemic, and obviously like virtual, ability to connect. I mean, the points that Ken mentioned and Elizabeth mentioned about burnout and whatever, like it's driven by always on, right? Like you can get IM'd, text message, like it goes to the weekend. So I think it's really hard to define a work week in terms of hours, right? When we've thought about it traditionally as 40 hours, clocking in, clocking out. The reality is, you've got an hour where you're dropping the kids off at school and picking them up. I'm thinking about my day to day, right? In the middle of workday, but I started at 5:30 a.m. reading articles and doing emails. And so, yep, I've got a break up here. Like I'm not keeping track of hours. I'm certain it's way more than 40. But that's also part of the flexibility that employees actually desire, right? So it's less about keeping track of overall hours. It's more about the quality of those hours, the quality of the interactions and meetings we're having, several points that my colleagues on the panel have kind of pointed out. And so, at the end of the day, right, it's like I might do 4 hours of work between 8 p.m. and midnight, and that might not be the traditional work hours. There might be some weeks where I only work 20 or 30 hours a week. There might be others where I work 60 or 70. I mean, I do think senior leaders and managers really need to have a much more enlightened view of this. And I understand there's hourly workers and, punch in, punch out, categories that are really important. But, if we're talking about, full-time employees, a much more enlightened view of this. It's going to ebb and flow based on schedules and availability. It's an ebb and flow based on where people are in their lives, right? I mean, we already have ebb and flow based on major events like having a baby, et cetera. there's just times, you know what, when I'm really tired or burned out, like, why shouldn't I be able to just kind of ratchet it down just a little bit? Yeah, I'll come to the most important meetings. Then there's other weeks where I have burstable energy and I'm like on fire and I'm really engaged in a big project. So I think we need to get out of how we're measuring the actual hours in a 7-day work week, and just, think about what is the healthy flow of this, in terms of what makes sense for the employee, for a particular team, or the context of what's going on in the world at the time. I mean, that's a major factor here.
Definitely. So quality of work over quantity of hours. We had a question that just came in while you were talking, actually, for you again, Brandon. What do you recommend for maintaining boundaries when reserving one work day per week for learning? It can be challenging to refrain from responding to that one email chain or that one task that you know is always waiting for your attention. Same.
Yeah, no, look, another awesome question. Nothing easy about that, right? Part of it is about your individual behaviors, right? Like, I'm going to shut off email while I'm, doing this asynchronous program, right? Or, I'm going to take the day off. My calendar is already blocked. I just in my own team, we recently invested in a LinkedIn learning license, right? And so we're doing a lot of asynchronous learning, but I've told my team, book it in your day, schedule it like it's a meeting, like it's a client meeting. Don't change that meeting, right? Like, that's a meeting that can't move. And use that time during how you think of your workday time. The other thing we're doing, to, I think, Ken's good points, is that a lot of it's asynchronous, but just this morning on our 11 a.m. team meeting, we did a debrief of one of the courses that our team took asynchronously, and we had a live team conversation. Then we had small group breakouts. It was social. I mean, there was a human element. I mean, yep, we were still on a Zoom call, but there was a human, element and linkage to it. And so I think it is, managers need to support what is ultimately going to be an individual behavior around blocking off the time, keeping it as what I would call sacred time on the calendar, not letting other things interfere. But of course, we can all be guilty of, our technology behaviors. If my iPhone is right here and I'm checking a message and my IM is on, right? Like, are we really focused on anything we're doing? I mean, that's an honest question about whether it's learning or something else.
Absolutely. Yeah, I am working on this project management course right now, and I have it blocked off in my schedule on a weekly basis, and I still move things around so I can do things. But I guess as long as I'm getting that work done, it's good. It's tough though. Like, I really want to, like, oh, I have my 2 to 3 hour block of work that I want to do, but it's always about that balance, isn't it? These are some great questions coming in, y'all. Keep them coming. We had some questions come in for Elizabeth, as well as some comments as well. People really loved that journey grid that you shared. So I'm sure people will be returning to that. People were also asking for, and I apologize because I'm not sure what point in the discussion this was, but people were asking for a source that you were using at the beginning of your presentation. So what sources were you using? Just curious.
I'm not sure if it was related to stats around engagement. And I mean, the only place I really mentioned statistics based on studies was as it related to engagement and impact. So Gallup is one about engaged teams and greater profitability. Gallup had a study on that. Bureau of Labor Statistics did a study on engagement and lower absenteeism rates. And Forbes did the article on Best Buy and ROI calculation.
Cool. I love Gallup. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So a question that came in for you was, do you use a measurement platform of some kind to enable data collection and reporting?
So a really cool thing that was just implemented here is the use of Visier, Visier. Yeah. So those of us in leadership positions can go in and grab data that HR has deemed important, part of the scorecard. They're trying to get all of the HR scorecard data into Visier. And that gives us a line of sight. Quick, easy pull. I did see some comments about it's hard for L&D just to get data from the business. So if you have a tool like that, it makes it really easy to kind of pull that on our own without the bottleneck of putting in a request for someone else to get that data for us. So it's nice and timely for us to get data that way.
Absolutely. I actually had a question for you while you were talking. I was thinking, again, this is to Elizabeth. Hang on, I lost my questions. Oh yeah. So what are some of the mistakes that you see learning and development currently making with data and people analytics?
Either focusing on the wrong things. So I would say it's easy to get lost in the data because it's everywhere. Focusing on things where L&D is not the solution. So, and I saw in the chat too, people agreeing, picking a data point that maybe the correlation is so far apart that when you implement a solution, you can't really justify that you moved the needle because there were 10 other things going on intended to move the needle. So maybe picked the wrong thing there. So I think it's really honing in on the right data point with how you can create an impact to move the needle. I mean, it's as simplistic as that. I think it's easier to say than to do because we get lost in, we can help everyone. It's just L&D mentality. I think we want to help everyone. So just being really targeted on where you can draw those direct correlations.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. My next question is for Brandon. So do you think that the 4+1 work week model can be sort of like an equalizer for the issues many hybrid organizations face where remote learners and in-person learners may be having different experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. I mean, I like some of the points that Ken was pointing towards, right? Like I actually, I agree with him on the idea that what we're doing in L&D can actually be a bit of the, proverbial tip of the spear and changing our overall work practices, right? Thinking about, L&D, how do we make it fun? How do we make it engaging? How do we make it human? How do we make it social, right? And I do think we can do a lot of that, in some cases, all of it in a virtual environment, asynchronously live, right? But I also do think that, we have increasing opportunities to bring people together into, pods of various sorts, right? Cohorts, we could give it a lot of different, names and terminology, for in-person opportunities. I mean, I've been thinking about it regionally. I've got a highly distributed team all over the country, but we still do have like some semblance of regional hubs and the ability for people to get together. So I actually do think that, the CLO leadership can kind of lead the rest of the workplace by ways that we're doing some of these learning examples. And, at the end of the day, right, I go back to this, this increasing appetite among people to learn and grow and develop and what they're doing. Companies that allow that to happen while they're there, it gets all to the points Elizabeth has emphasized around employee engagement. And by the way, some of you might have caught this. I used to be at Gallup. I was the head of our education and workforce development practice at Gallup for 7 years before my time at Kaplan. And one of the big things that Gallup reported just in the last couple of months was the importance of having a best friend at work. It's always been an important element of employee engagement, but it's even more so now post-pandemic in the context of increasing loneliness and things like that, right? And so now you say, again, back to one of Ken's points, how can we use learning as a tool to create friendship, right? Like that common bond. I actually think we have more leeway there than we do in a lot of our kind of traditional workplace practices. And so it's not just, hey, we're doing it for learning and development. It's also a bit of a testing ground for, overall work practice, changes. And so I'm very optimistic about all this because I think we have all the momentum coming from, voice and a growing movement among employees. And I do think we increasingly have a number of enlightened leaders who see that this is really, really critical. So I just think I'm on the optimistic side. There's going to be a lot of innovation here, and it's going to lead to just frankly having more fun in learning and more fun in the workplace. Like, we haven't used that word fun in a while. We got to get back to how we have some fun in all this, gang.
Absolutely. Those are some great points. Moving right along, my next question is for Ken. Oh wait, I lost it. Hang on, there it is. Okay. So how does technology have a role in driving human connection? And then alternatively, what sort of challenges do you see it as presenting?
Yeah, technology is core to how we learn and how we connect with people, right? We use Teams or Zoom to engage with one another face to face. We use Slack or Teams to connect with one another. And there's online learning that's, a ton of investments been done for education and for adult learners. And it's great. It has a purpose. However, people are craving human connection. And when you invest in platform, AI, data analytics, all great things, again, all great things. But when you just invest in that and really kind of leave the human element as kind of a secondary priority, you do exactly what you did. You put technology first. And we still live in a world where humans are driving the majority of work, and human collaboration is one of the most important things in getting work done. So when you invest in technology, that's what you get: a technology first workplace, a technology first learning environment. And I don't want to work in that type of world. And I don't think a lot of people do. So that's my take on it.
For sure. My next question is for Elizabeth. So as organizations are looking to the future, a lot of them are faced with the need for upskilling or perhaps reskilling. What tips can you share for measuring the success of a reskilling program or an upskilling program?
Yeah, I think it's important. I think you do need technology and a tool to help you map that out, specifically understanding what skills are existing across your organization, understanding transferable skills, and then forward thinking the skills of the future. And what skill sets you already have, what are the gaps, and what you need now and what you need in the future. And then making sure how you attach learning to it is breaking down those skills into topics where we think we can either curate learning on demand, we can create learning programs, we can help with digital resources, but making sure that the skills that are prevalent as highly needed for the future of the organization are attached to learning that we can provide the organization. I think that's important. You have to attach those things together. Otherwise, it's just a platform and a lot of learning happening everywhere, and people don't know what to take, when, why, or how. So connecting that dots is really important. And I would say that there's lots of skills engines now. So my advice is to make sure that your skills engines align with the terms that you're using for skills. So if you have a skills engine and your like we use SAP SuccessFactors that has a skills engine, then your LMS has a skills engine. So just making sure the way you talk about skills, you have common terminology and what you're referring to, and that will help us bridge the gap.
Yes, yeah, that's so important. With just the remaining couple of minutes, I had an idea of asking people this question that I should have been using. I think the whole time it's a great question. What are you all reading right now? Just as like a final thought, sort of takeaway, what books or podcasts or ebooks, magazines, columns, what is in your library right now, what has been helping you stay fresh and what is helping you stay top of mind?
Well, if your camera is good enough, you can see what's in my library right now live. But
a good one.
No, I'll just mention. I mean, one of the more influential books that I read this past year is The Tyranny of Merit by Michael Sandel. It's a takedown around a lot of our traditional thinking about how we think about this precious thing that we all value called meritocracy. And it's a real question, like to what degree we actually are living that, right? And he focuses it through the lens of higher education and our US higher ed system. But I think it has a lot of application and some really deep and important thinking for all of us that are in learning, human development, education roles. One of the more influential books that I've read. So Michael Sandel, Tyranny of Merit is something I would recommend to pretty much anybody on this symposium today.
Awesome.
I have my book. I don't know if you can see it. Think Like a Monk. I know you can't see it. There's just a lot going on in the world and in my life, and sometimes I need help on understanding how to recenter and think about things a little bit differently. So that's the book I'm reading now. There's a lot of really good L&D podcasts that I follow. I'm trying to find what it's called, but usually I follow L&D podcasts and then read my calming books to help.
Cool. Yeah, I'm dropping these all in the chat for people to look at as well. So that's why I'm multitasking.
And podcast, HBR, Coaching Real Leaders. It's exec coaches who are having real conversations with real leaders about problems they're having. You can find someone who has a similar situation as you. There's so many episodes. And then book, Leading from the Middle. I mentioned it. It's a concept of how in this new world of work, anyone who's scrunched in the middle, how do you do your job? And it's been a game changer for me.
That one sounds particularly interesting, especially with everything I'm hearing about the role of managers and their role in this new world of work. So that's super cool as well. Dropping this one into the chat for everyone as well. And then, so we are unfortunately at the top of our hour now officially. Brandon, Elizabeth, and Ken, thank you all so much for your time and expert insight today. This was a great discussion. And that is also a wrap on this year's sessions for the 2022 CLO Symposium. What an amazing few days it's been. I'd like to invite you all one last time back into the main room for our closing session and to kick off our final networking hour. It's been a pleasure connecting and learning with you all these past few days. Thank you all so much, everyone. Until next time, see you then.